ॐ भूर्भुवः स्वः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो नः प्रचोदयात्। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः. Namaste, my dear friends. This is video number 11 on Ramana Gita. This video starts with chapter 18 on the glory of the Siddhas character. Ramana could be said to have brought fame to his lineage by being a knower of Brahma, by his unswerving self-avoidance. Reflections of Vedic Rishis, Viswanatha Swami, The Mountain Path, January 1975. Translation of Professor K. Swaminathan and Sri Viswanatha Swami. Ganapati Muni composes a long poem, 25 verses, in praise of Bhagavan to end the Ramana Gita. Like the Bhagavad Gita, the Ramana Gita has 18 chapters. To dweller in ashrama on Arunachala, steadfast and stainless Paramahansa, assuming activity from compassion while ever established in the imperishable Atma. 3. His words dispel all doubt. His glance, like an ankusha, bring under control the mad elephant of the deluded mind. He is ever active for the happiness of others and utterly indifferent to his body's needs. A.R. Natarajan translation. Verse 2. He is the steadfast, immaculate Paramahansa dwelling in an ashrama on Arunachala. Though abiding always in the self, he assumes activity out of love. Commentary. When the verses of this chapter were composed, Ramana was residing at Skandashramam on the eastern slopes of Arunachala hill. Hansa is a mythical bird. A wise person is termed Paramahansa, for like the Hansa which can separate the milk from water and drink it, he can discriminate between the real and unreal and abide in the real alone. Being established in the natural state, it was unnecessary for Ramana to be active at all. But Ramana was accessible all the time, clarifying the genuine doubts of seekers and guiding them in their inward journey. Why? The reason could only be his universal love. Upadesa Sarm, verse 15. Verse 3. His words dispel the innumerable doubts of those who have taken refuge in him. His look is like a good which brings under control the mad. His look is like a god which brings under control the mad elephant, the deluded mind. He is forever active for the welfare of others but utterly indifferent to his body's needs. Commentary. Ankusha is a sharp instrument used by Mahut for controlling the elephant. Ramana's penetrating look destroys the sensory frenzy of the devotee's mind. One must surrender, be ready to receive the benefit of the gracious glance. Hence the reference to those who have taken refuge in him. The expression others is from the standpoint of onlookers For Ramana all are the self. There were no others. Ramana's utter indifference to his body is evidenced by his insistence on sharing and sharing alike. Though his body had been ravaged by his total neglect of it in the first few years after his arrival at Arunachala, he would not permit any preferential treatment. Translation of Professor K. Swaminathan and Sri Viswanatha Swami. Ganapati Muni composes a long poem on praise of Bhagavan to end the Ramana Gita. Like the Bhagavad Gita, Ramana Gita has 18 chapters. 4. His body glows like a ripe mango, absolute master of the fickle senses. He is wedded to the immortal Valli who is pure awareness. In a few words, he conveys the substance of all scriptures. 5. With his pure effulgent rays, he clears like the sun in due season the dullness of his devotees. He is an inexhaustible mine of auspicious qualities. A.R. Natarajan translation, verse 4. His body glows like a ripe mango, master of the fickle senses. He is wedded to immortal Vali who is conscious in all fullness. In a few words, he conveys the substance of scriptures. Commentary. Mastery over senses is usually referred to in the context of mind control. In Maharshi's case, mind was destroyed after his confrontation with death. There being no outward movement of the mind, the power of the senses to distract and externalize became extinct. The reference to Valli has a double meaning. The Muni had a divine vision as a result of which he saw Ramana as Subramanya in human form. Traditionally, one of the consorts of Subramanya is Valli. The other meaning is that given in the verse itself, namely that Ramana and consciousness are non separate. Verse 5. With his pure and effulgent rays, he clears like the sun at the appropriate time. The ignorance of his devotees. He is the repository of limitless auspicious qualities. Commentary. The expression at appropriate time is worth noting. Ramana would not force the pace or accelerate the inwardness of the devotees. His constant grace would ripen them in time, the time factor being dependent on whether the material is gunpowder or wet charcoal. The analogy of the sun is given because as the sun makes the lotus blossom by its pure rays, so too does Ramana make the heart lotus of the devotees blossom. All auspicious virtues reside in Ramana automatically, as he is always reveling in the self which is eternal and pure. Translation of Professor K. Swaminathan and Sri Viswanatha Swami. Ganapati Muni composes a long poem, 25 verses, in praise of Bhagavan to end the Ramana Gita like the Bhagavad Gita. 6. In speech, he is extremely soft, in look, cool and compassionate. His face is like a full blown lotus. His mind is a void like the moon in daylight. He shines in the heart as the sun in the sky. 7. Pitiless to his body, strict in the observance of discipline, wholly averse to the delights of the senses. He is a sage without anger and desire, besides himself with the joy of pure awareness. A.R. Natarajan translation verse 6. In speech he is extremely soft, in look cool and compassionate. His face like a full-blown lotus, his mind is shorn of luster like the moon in daylight. He shines in the heart like the sun in the sky. Commentary. Free from any kind of partiality, devoid of anger, full of love, Ramana's speech was soft and unhurried. His face was reflective of the Brahmic state in which he was abiding. Hence its compelling beauty, just as the moon's luster is lost in the brightness of the daylight sun. Ramana's mind merged in the self has no independent brightness. Here one has to remember that the mind only reflects the light of the self. When there is awareness of the resplendent source, then the mind's reflected glory is merged in it. Ramana's self abidance being spontaneous, he shines in the heart like the sun in the sky. Verse 7. He is unconcerned about his body, strict in the observance of discipline, averse to sensory delights, is a sage without anger or desire, and drunk with the joy of consciousness. Commentary. One pampers the body because one identifies oneself with it. Since Ramana was free of attachment to the body, he was utterly indifferent to its needs. Those familiar with the life of Ramana are aware that even as a young lad of 16, he had stayed in Patalinga, an underground temple without food, oblivious to his body for days on end. Ramana's actions were perfect, springing from the natural discipline of one living in harmony with nature. The natural state is one in which bliss brims over, and Ramana was always in it. Translation of Professor K. Swaminathan and Sri Vishwanatha Swami. Ganapati Muni composes a long poem, 25 verses, in praise of Bhagavan to end the Ramana Gita. 8. Free from infatuation, greed, distracting thought, and envy, he is ever blissful. He is ever active, helping others to cross the sea of becoming regardless of reward. 9. When Ganpati, saying Mother is mine, sat on the lap of Parvati, Kumara resorted, Never mind, father's mine, and got onto Shiva's lap and was kissed by him on the head. Of this Kumara, who pierced with his lance the Kroncha hill, Ramana is a glorious manifestation. A.R. Natarajan translation, verse 8. He is free from the delusion of the senses, greed, conceptualization, envy, is ever blissful. He is always active in helping others cross the ocean of karma without expecting any benefit in exchange. Commentary. The only activity in which Ramana is engaged in always is helping persons to escape the cycle of births and deaths. Does the sun expect anything in return for its life-giving light to the world? Anyway, what could be given as reward for this ceaseless activity? Even so, the Maharshi retained the body after the experience which made him immortal in order to teach the way to share his experience of discovering innate happiness by searching for the true import of I. The effulgence emanating from the Maharshi had a transforming influence. Borrowing Ganapati Muni's poetic expression, Ramana is the great cook who cuts off the ego of human beings steeped in ignorance, seasons them, and makes them over to Shiva as food. Chatvarismat Ganapati Muni, verse 32. Verse 9. When Ganpati sat on the lap of Parvati saying, Mother is mine, Subramanya got onto Shiva's lap claiming, Never mind, father is mine, and was kissed by him on the head of the Subramanya who pierced the Kroncha hill. Ramana is a glorious manifestation. Commentary. Ganpati Muni is referring to an ancient story in the Puranas. Ganpati was regarded as a favorite of his mother Parvati and Subramanya, that of Shiva. The Muni restates here his vision set out in chapter 11 of Ramana Gita, that Ramana is only the human embodiment of Subramanya. Translation of Professor K. Swaminathan and Sri Viswanatha Swami. 10. He is the mystic import of the mantra Om Vacha Bhuve Namaha. Salutation to the fire of Burma, whence emerges the word. 11. An ascetic without danda, yet he is a danda pani. He is Tarka for crossing the sea of suffering, yet is the foe of Tarka. He has renounced Bhava, yet is a constant worshipper of Bhava. He is a Hansa, yet without attachment to Mansa. Danda, an ascetic staff. Dandapani, staff holder, an aspect of Kumara Tarka. Ferryman Tarka, also an Asura killed by Kumara Bhava, becoming Sansara. Bhava, also Shiva. Hansa, swan. A sage is termed Pramhansa. Mansa, mind, also a Himalayan lake favorite home of swans. A.R. Natarajan translation. Verse 10. He is the mystic import of the mantra Om Vatsad Bhuve Namaha. Salutation to the fire of Burma, whence emerges the word. Verse 11. He is a yogi without staff, yet he is the staff holder. He is the henchman for crossing the sea of suffering, yet he is the enemy of Tarka. He has renounced the world, yet he is the constant worshipper of Shiva. He is Hansa, yet without attachment to the mind. Commentary. Danda is a staff. Traditionally, sannyasis who have taken to the ochre robe have a staff. Ramana has renounced whom, but he does not have a staff. Though he appears without staff in his human form, he is really a staff holder, since he is the incarnation of Subramanya, the commander in chief of celestial forces. Tarka again is used in a double sense. Ramana ferries one across the ocean of transmigration, and in that sense he is Tarka. In the opposite sense, he is the enemy of the demon Tarka, whom Subramanya conquered in battle. Mansa is also used in the double sense of mind and lake. Mansa Srovar, the abode of the mythical bird Hansa. Ramana is not attached to the mind, though as the supreme Hansa his abode is Mansa. Translation of Professor K. Swaminathan and Sri Viswanatha Swami. 12. More more imperturbable than Meru, hill of gold, more unfathomable than the ocean, more patient than the immovable earth, the mother of all. a paragon of self-control, far removed from even the whisper of excitement. A.R. Natarajan translation. Verse 12. In steadfastness he is comparable to the hill Meru. He is more unfathomable than the ocean, more patient than Mother Earth, exemplar of self-control, far removed from lack of peace. In the Puranas, the hill Meru is always referred to for its majesty, just as one would refer to the Himalayas in the present day. It is said that even gods and goddesses, the sun and moon, circumambulate this hill. So too, earnest seekers would gather round Ramana. The question of mental agitation could not arise for Ramana as he was always in the blissful natural state. Why craze? Because he is fearless, having conquered the ego. Translation of Professor K. Swaminathan and Sri Vishwanatha Swami. The Dhyana Sloka, like the cool rays of the moon, he showers such grace. I meditate on his all compassionate face. The friend of the sacred lily, sapphire, blue in luster like the sun who befriends the lotus too, like his father Dakshinamurti in this state of Brahmic splendor. On him I contemplate. He sat still under the beautiful banyan tree in powerful silence, setting his devotees free. On such a marvel is this my younger brother. To compare with him there shall never be another. The famous Dhyana Sloka by Ganapati Muni said to invoke Bhagavan's presence. He is like the moon, the friend of the blue lily. In the same way, in luster, he is like the sun, the lord of the lotus. By his abidance in Burma, state of pure being, he reminds one of his father. Six under the banyan tree, firm like a rock. Is this my younger brother, him the moveless one we lovingly remember? The Dhyana Sloka. The Tantra Shastra has devised a method of invocation more powerful than an ordinary human memory or the most moving pictorial record. The gods and goddesses are posited in the supernal ether and they take names and forms to operate in this world constituted of name and form. Each deity responds just like a person when called by name. Each deity has its own nada, illness of vibration in the high supernals. The rishi, the seer, when he meditates on the deity, comes into contact with those particular lines of vibration and is able to formulate in human language the name, the form, and characteristics. Such a formulation is what is usually known as dhyana sloka, an articulated piece in the form of verse for meditation on the deity. The dhyana sloka is the voice of the seer who has recorded in words that line the living experience. When uttered under proper conditions, it becomes a vibrant vehicle through which the presence of the deity is sensed immediately. For invoking the presence of the Maharshi, we have fortunately a dhyana sloka bequeathed to us by the great Ganapati Muni. This verse with slight amendment was quoted as Sri Ramana Dhyana by Sri Kapali Sastriar in his Sanskrit commentary. To quote from his dedication of Ramana Gita Prakasha, when I came to this verse, the Maharshi, who had been silent so far, made a remark. Speaking for 5 to 10 minutes, he started quoting approvingly the opinion of another that the verse is quite fit to be the dhyana sloka of the whole Gita. There are two elements in the verse which I may note in passing. One is the blooming of the eyes, the other is the silence by which Shiva as Dakshinamurti teaches his disciples Sankara Narayanan Bhagwan and Nana. Kapali Sastri, the Maharshi, from Kapali's diary, October 13, Sri Maharshi knew that I was to leave the day, as I had the previous evening informed him about my program, and I purposely retained the last chapter for this morning. Then I started reading 8 a.m. and finished it by 9 o'clock. When I came to the verse Nira, Nilari Vanda, the Maharshi made a remark speaking for 5 to 10 minutes. He stated, naming a gentleman, he said that this verse is quite fit to be the dhyana sloka of the whole Gita. It is very significant that Sri Maharshi, who had been silent so far, quoted here approvingly the opinion of another that this should be considered a verse appropriate to describe the Maharshi himself. There are two elements in showering grace. The verse which I may note in passing. One is the blooming of the eyes, the other is the silence by which Shiva as Dakshinamurti teaches his disciples. Spreading grace like the friend of the blue lunar lily, bright like the solar lord of the lotus. By his pure abidance in Brahma, he evokes his father under the banyan tree. Firm like a rock is this my younger brother. Now, one remarkable fact is when I started reading it, it should have taken easily 15 hours to finish the portion at a modest rate. I do not know how it was done in 6 hours. The tone was loud, the throat was not affected, and the pauses for rest were in the minimum. All this one can easily see if he has eyes is due to the fact that the Maharshi understood that I was to finish and go. A.R. Natarajan translation verse 13. In showering grace he is like the moon, the friend of the blue lily. In lustre he is the sun which befriends the lotus. In his Brahmic state he reminds one of his father, Dakshinamurti, sealed under the banyan tree. I contemplate on such a one, my firm younger brother. Commentary. This verse is regarded as a dhyana sloka or an invocatory verse for evoking Ramana's presence. The reference to Dakshinamurti is the first spiritual teacher of the world who taught in silence or mauna. The story goes that Shiva took the form of a young ascetic and sat under the banyan tree to dispel the doubts of some earnest seekers of truth. The teacher was a youth. The students were old, but their doubts were answered in his potent silence. Ramana too often taught in silence, and many an unsaid doubt of his seekers was answered through his language of silence. Ramana therefore reminds one of Shiva as Dakshinamurti. The adjective firm refers to the state of Ramana's mind, calm and waveless like the ocean in mid-afternoon. Translation of Professor K. Swaminathan and Sri Viswanatha Swami. 14. Even now, in the thousand-petaled lotus of his head, there shines Devsena, lovely in looks and mind, in the form of auspicious thoughts, and yet he is free from the fantastic scent of desire. Though, though thus he is a householder, he is the king of ascetics, senior consort of Kumara. A.R. Natarajan translation, verse 14. Even now, Devasana, lovely in looks and mind, shines in the thousand-petaled lotus of his head in the form of auspicious thought, and yet he is free from desire. Though he is thus a householder, he is the king of ascetics. Commentary. The Muni's vision of Ramana was as the divine Subramanya who had two consorts, Valli and Devsana. Valli is referred to in verse 4 of this chapter as consciousness, and Devsana is referred to in this verse as the pure mind. He is the highest yogi because of his steady Brahmic state. Translation of Professor K. Swaminathan and Sri Viswanatha Swami. 15. A giver of boon to devotees, the Guru, even of the great Ganapati, master of mantras. Like the celestial tree, he assuages the anguish of those who seek the shadow of his feet. 16. He is a reincarnation of Kumarila Bhatta, praised by assemblies of scholars, the author of Tantra Vartika, elixir of the Vedas, brilliant with various ingenious ideas. In this birth, however, he elucidates the teachings of Vedanta alone. He is the master who composed the five gems on Arunachala, the quaint essence of Vedantic utterances, brief like sutras but all comprehensive and filled with hidden meaning. A.R. Natarajan translation, verse 15. Born giver of devotees, Guru, even to the master of mantras, the great Ganapati, like the celestial tree, he removes the sorrow of all those who seek his feet. Verse 16. He is the reincarnation of Kumarila Bhatta, the sustainer of Vedas, author of Tantra Vartika, praised by scholars, brilliant with various ingenious ideas. In this birth, however, he exposes the teachings of only Vedanta. Verse 17. He is the preceptor who composed Arunachala Pancharatnam, the essence of Vedanta, brief like aphorisms, but all comprehensive with hidden meaning. Commentary. The beauty of the Arunachala Pancharatna is that each of the fourfold paths to self-knowledge, karma, bhakti, yoga and jnana are set out in a self-contained way. One verse covering a path, it could. He said that these verses were Ramana's vision of the paths put down in words and not mere compositions. The next verse deals with the beauty of these five gems. Translation of Professor K. Swaminathan and Sri Viswanatha Swami. 18. Though not at all trained in the language of the gods and unacquainted with poetry, he is yet the author of works wherein crowds of brilliant ideas trail behind the inspired expression. 19. Again, this boundless genius is another advent of the master poets, the twice born Tamil child who, drinking the breast milk of the mother of the universe, sang in dancing tunes the praises of Shiva. A.R. Natarajan translation. Verse 18. Though untrained in Sanskrit and without familiarity with poetry, he is the author of works wherein crowds of brilliant ideas trail behind inspired expressions. Commentary. When words come forth from sages, they are the product of their direct vision of truth. Each word is therefore pregnant with meaning. Poetically speaking, ideas would be rushing in a queue behind those inspired words. These five gems were later translated by Maharshi himself into Tamil. Reference is made to Arunachala Pancharatna of verse 17. Verse 19. This unique person is another advent of the master poet, the twice born Tamil child who was suckled by the Divine Mother and who sung in lifting tunes the praises of Shiva. Commentary. Here he Muni regards Ramana as Jnana Sambandha, one of the three outstanding Tamil Sevite saints. The story goes that at the tender age of 3, Sambandha was suckled by the Divine Mother Parvati, and outpourings in praise of Shiva began straightway. Even though he left the body at the age of 16, Sambandha's mark on Saivite devotional poetry is indelible. Translation of Professor K. Swaminathan and Sri Viswanatha Swami. 20. This is the third appearance here on earth of the God who pierced off yore the Croncha hill, and now he has come to quell the darkness of mere logic by providing a living example of abidance in Brahma, pure being. Kumara. 21. He is a poet of renown in Tamil, the language adored by Agastya and other sages. The eternal light supreme he beheld with his own inner light, unaided by Guru.A.R. Natarajan. Translation. Verse 20. This is the third appearance of the God who once pierced the Croncha hill. His advent now is to dispel the darkness of mere logic by being a living example of abidance in Brahma. Verse 21. He is a renowned poet in Tamil, a language worshipped by Agastya and other sages. Without a guru, by his own sharp intellect, he becomes intuitively aware of the eternal supreme light. Commentary. The Maharshi had already composed by 1917 the five hymns to Arunachala, the marital garland of letters, the decade, 8 verses, the 9 gems and 5 gems in exquisite Tamil poetry. He had no guru in physical form at the time of the death experience which liberated him. He had no knowledge of the scriptures and had not even heard of the words Atma, Brahma, and the like. He was in this sense a self-taught knower of Brahma. Translation of Professor K. Swaminathan and Sri Viswanatha Swami. 22. In a body, a dull cowherd, a monkey or dog, a knave, a scholar, or a devotee. Everywhere he beholds the same being and without the least partiality. 23. Full of power, yet full of peace, full of devotion, yet without sense of difference, free from likes, yet loving all the world, God manifest, yet in conduct humble. A.R. Natarajan. Translation. Verse 22. Verse 22. He looks upon all with the same even-mindedness, be it a boy, a dull cowherd, monkey, dog, a rogue scholar, or a devotee. Commentary. While replying to a question from Ganapati Muni, he had clarified that the hallmark of the wise is the equality. Ramana's life itself was evidence of this. His liberating touch was available to both his mother and the ashram cow Lakshmi. The question of differentiation could not at all arise as there were no others. The reference here to cowherd is to all who are steeped in ignorance. Hence the adjective dull. Mon- Monkey is referred to for one is prone to lose one's patience with its ceaseless mischief. Ramana could understand the language of monkeys and dispense justice in a way they could comprehend. Verse 23, full of power yet full of peace, full of devotion yet free from a sense of difference, free from attachments yet loving all humanity. God manifest yet in conduct humble. Commentary. The coexistence of the opposites is seen in Ramana. The powerful are never at peace with themselves, nor would they let others be in peace. Abiding in the self, Ramana was the repository of all power, but his power spread the fragrance of a silent mind all round. Ordinarily, devotion implies a difference between the worshipper and the worshipped, but Ramana's devotion was the supreme one of the repose in the self, free of thought, where all differences are lost in the oneness of existence. Attachments are the product of the ego. Ramana was egoless. Does it mean that his love was any the less than one in ordinary human relationship? No, it was the limitless universal love springing from the heart. Translation of Professor K. Swaminathan and Sri Vishwanatha Swami. 24. Writing down the message. This goes to the presence of the Father. Let no search be made for me. He left home and arrived at the foot of Arunachala. Translation Professor K. Swaminathan and Vishwanatha Swami. 24. Writing down the message. This goes to the presence of the Father. Let no search be made for me. He left home and arrived at the foot of Arunachala. A.R. Natarajan translation verse 24. Leaving a message. This goes to the presence of the Father. Let no search be made for me. He left home and reached Arunachala. From the age of innocence, Ramana was intuitively aware of the glory of Arunachala Shiva, but he did not know that it was in the form of a hill in Tiruvannamalai. This knowledge came to him through a relative a few months before he left home. Then came his death experience and consciousness that he was the deathless spirit, which made continued stay at home meaningless. While leaving, he left a letter in Tamil, the English version of which reads as follows. I have set out in quest of my Father in accordance with his command. It is on a virtuous enterprise that this has embarked. Therefore, none need grieve over this act, and let no money be spent in search of this. The letter was not signed. Here, command refers to the choiceless inner compulsion. Ramana Maharshi and the Path of Self-Knowledge by Arthur Osborne, page 26. Translation of Professor K. Swaminathan and Sri Vishwanatha Swami. 25. Of Bhagavan Ramana, thus happily endowed with a wealth of auspicious qualities, Amritanatha Yatindra humbly enquired concerning the boundless glory of Siddhas. 26. To him Sri Bhagavan dweller on the holy hill, replied, the glory of Siddha is beyond imagination. They are equal to Shiva. Indeed, they are the very form of Shiva. They have the power to grant every prayer. This ends the Ramana Gita composed by Vasishta Ganapati Muni. In young boy, dull cowherd, monkey or dog, in rogue or scholar, each as self being of that equality as sadhu or hog, all the same at heart in love is his seeing from preference free yet loving the world. God's splendor as a lotus flower and unfurled from whom he wrote, I go to my Father's presence, let no search be made and led traveled thence to Arunachala fit. To this Mahatma one humbly asked of power of Siddhas. To him he answered, beyond image or fears they are wise. In form of Shiva are they seers, and there is that power to grant all prayer. So ends the Muni's song with praise. Fair air Natarajan translation, verse 25 of Bhagavan, thus happily endowed with a wealth of auspicious qualities. Amritanatha, the sannyasi, humbly inquired about the limitless glory of realized persons. Verse 26, Bhagavan, who is always rooted in the self, replied thus, the glory of realized persons is beyond imagination. They are like Shiva, they are the very forms of Shiva. They have the power to grant boons. Commentary. True power is not the power to dazzle the mind by performing miracles, but is to abide in the self firmly. Those who so abide are endowed with all auspicious qualities, and hence they are like Shiva, the embodiment of auspiciousness. They radiate celestial beauty. They are therefore verily the forms of Shiva. They have the power to grant prayers. How can they when they have no sankalpas or thought or desire to help? The reason is that their very presence, sannidhi, generates automatic divine action. Karma is warded off and boons granted invariably but involuntarily. There are two types of powers, those which involve the exercise of mental power, the other which are natural to tapas, penance, which come to person who is self-aware. The former is a distraction and a person possessing it might still be ignorant. The latter is God given and is exercised by them not by an act of volition but purely as channels of the great force which possesses them. While considering the glory of the Siddhas, one has to remember that their essential characteristic is not the power they sport but their equality, in which there is unwavering perception of unity. Sat Darshan Bhashe, page 23. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya, chapter 18:10. He is the mystic import of the mantra Om Vatsde Bhuve Namaha. Salutation to the fire of Brahma, whence emerges the word. In this world, there is no cognition which does not follow language. All knowledge appears as if permeated by words. Bhartari, chapter 18, verse 10 of Sri Ramana Gita. Notes below, based on Ganapati Muni's Guru Mantra Bhashyam, also known as Anubandham to Sri Ramana Gita Tiruvannamalai, 6th edition, 1977, page 116. In this verse, Kanya Kavya Kantha Ganapati Muni as the seer reveals the Bij Aksharas, seed syllables and or letters which make up Sri Ramana's special mantra. This mantra reveals various correspondences and is said to be endowed with Shakti power. And of chapter 18 on the glory of Siddhas. Bija Veda Adi, beginning and end of the Vedas. Om. Paka Damana Indra Uttra, mightier than Indra, the subduer of the demon called Paka, symbolic of the overcoming of ignorance. Sri Maharshi lies beyond even Lord Indra's Bija is La. When we go beyond this, we find Bija Va, the Lord of the senses. Kachepasa Kurmesa, Lord of tortoises, porter of the earth and all its jiva. Rudra Cha, Dharadra, the hill Mount Arunachala, the hill of dawn, supporter of universe, epithet of Shiva and symbolic of transcendence. Note Adhara is also an epithet of Vishnu as preserver. Susupti, known as sleep. Here it represents Shakti. Bha, note the vowel A is omitted. Samresvara, Lord of God Rudra, Amarta symbol, water. In this world there is no cognition which does not follow language. All knowledge appears as if permeated by words. That which purifies the word is the attainment of the Supreme Self. He who knows the truth of its origin attains the immortal Brahma. From the Vakyapadya of Bhartahari. The letters from Sri Ramanaswaram, 19th July 1947. Hearing, meditation, and the like. Yesterday, two Pandits came from Kumbakonam. This morning at 9 o'clock, they approached Bhagavan and said, Swami, we take leave of you. We pray that you may be pleased to bless us that our mind may merge or dissolve itself in Shanti. Bhagwan nodded his head as usual after they had left. He said, looking at Ramchandra Iyer, Shanti is the original state. If what comes from outside is rejected, what remains is peace. What then is there to dissolve or merge? Only that which comes from outside has to be thrown out. If people whose minds are mature are simply told that the Savrupa itself is Shanti, they get Jnana. It is only for immature minds that Sarvana and Manana are prescribed, but for mature minds there is no need of them. If people at a distance inquire how to go to Ramana Maharshi, we have to tell them to get into such and such a train or take such and such a path. But if they come to Tiruvannamalai, reach Ramanasramam, and step into the hall, it is enough if they are told here is that person. There is no need to move any further. Sarvana and Manana mean only those described in Vedanta, don't they? Said someone. Yes, Bhagwan replied, but one thing, not only are they there outward Sarvana and Manana, but there are also inward Sarvana and Manana. They must occur to a person as a result of the maturity of his mind. Those that are liable to do that Antra Sarvana, hearing inwardly, do not have any doubts. Whenever anyone asked what those Antra Sarvana are, he used to say, Antra Sarvana means the knowledge of that Atma which is in the cave of the heart, always illuminated with the feeling Ahem, Ahem, I, and to get that feeling to be in one's heart is manana, and to remain in one's self is nididhyasana. In this connection, it is worthwhile remembering the sloka written by Bhagavan bearing on this subject. In that sloka, mention is made not only to Atma Safurna but also how to secure it. Securing means only remaining in one's own self. Brahma is growing lustrously in the middle of the cave of the heart in the shape of the self, always proclaiming I am, become an Atmanistha, a self-realized person, either by making the mind absorbed in the search of the self or by making mind drown itself through control of the breath from the edition printed by Sri Ramana Maharshi, that from which all thoughts of embodied beings sally forth, point inward to the heart to describe may merely image mental part. So realize the mind's source is I, seeing that from which thought springs thou art. If in the stem my heart is the single showed how to connect by yoga to the root. The heart of all the whole receives start not from the pump but hear them as heareth in drawing and exhaling universe by I am lit. Some sonnets on chapter 5. Our self is unity. We have understood here hearts is subtly right of centers best. Susmana stream to Sahasrara flood and now your flower in lotus heart to rest. The goal of all in the heart, awareness flows from the heart to body whole, then impressions worldwide arise. Up, beholding these apart from sky, the soul enmeshed in sansara's snare becomes unwise. In the flame of flames, by candle of pure light, the circling moths consumed and swiftly things limened by power of mind and sight alike seem different to thought-bound eyes. Samadhi, firm one-pointed seeing in all, Sahaja Nirvikalpa finds their absence. This whole wide world on body sense does fall like rainbow prism, and indeed in heart is presence. The universe and entire and multiformed is mind, and whose origin is heart, here now to find the light of the mind, the ORB of space, array we merge in heart, describes in night a circle round our sun. The mind by Sahasra lit, like moon is one reflecting a greater light of self but part. Here gives light to Maya magician's art. A mortal man absents the heart sees mind. Moonlit cruising in dark light purblind. From observation may our meditation start, seeking not self, immortal source of light, but surfaces which silvered gleam from self apart. The ignorant soul deluded missed his sight. The one who knows reveals real light in mind as moon at noon in clear blue sky to find. So truly centering science of the heart, the supreme is the heart. To the wise, the universal face is not mind. To be true, all meaning else than heart is none. He is nothing but whole heart at birth. No notion differing seer from seen on earth can integrate man's conceit is unrefined. In heart abiding seer and seen are one. When stream of mind is stopped by swoon or excess elation, grief or terror, twill run swift into source to sleep unbeen known. Poor ignoramus toiling neath the sun into the line awareness dropped his thought. The sun within the vestal frame of self is ever ablaze. His sleep is not, but signs of heart will enter holy name. Extract from the diary of Kapali Sastriar's Part 1. I thought it would interest members to read extract from K's diary when he presented Ramana with his commentary on his Gita. It is quite long, so I will post in parts on a daily basis. Sri Kapali Sastriar wrote his Sanskrit commentary on the Ramana Gita in 1941 and paid a visit to Sri Maharshi to dedicate the work to him, and on his return in response to a pressing request for a full account of the trip, he gave a rapid narration which was recorded. When the typescript was read and shown to him, Sri Sastriar prefaced it with a note. The following was dictated in response to Madhav's request that I must narrate to him as closely as possible all about my trip to Tiruvannamalai. Naturally, this personal and intimate account was not meant for publication and as such was not revised by him. However, some extract from it are included in this section as they would be of special interest to the reader. Kapali Sastriar had intended to render his commentary on the Ramana Gita in English, but this never took place in his lifetime. In 1998, an English translation was at last prepared and is now available, published by Ramanasramam. It was on the morning of 10 October 1941 that I started for Tiruvannamalai, taking the 7:40 a.m. train. Fortunately, I got a compartment all to myself, and after arranging my things, I took the manuscript in order to check up and correct the possible slips therein, for when I was writing out the commentary, I did not look back at what I wrote. The train reached Tiruvannamalai in time, perhaps a few minutes before time. I took a Jutkatu and it was 12:45 p.m. when I reached the ashram. When the carriage turned to enter the ashram, I saw an ark in bold letters Sri Ramanasramam. It was not there 10 years ago when I last went there. I could not recognize the surroundings that it was the ashram. R took me to a building which I later learned to be what they call the office of the Sarvadhikari. When I turned to my left, the old lady Ekamma was sitting there with her usual rosary. Being very old, she invited me with nods. I expected change in her, and for her age, she did not look older. I stood at the threshold of the hall, 1 foot outside. Somehow my legs would not move forward. The head hung down. Feelings overpowered me, perhaps pent up for ages. They now found their vent. I muttered something with effort, raised my head, moved forwards, and saw the figure of Sri Maharshi reclining on the sofa as usual. Our eyes met. He nodded and said, hum, as if to say, why so much, why so much? I protest I prostrated myself, and as I was doing so, he said to an attendant close by, this is Kapali. When I heard my name being uttered by Maharshi, my mind jumped back to the old moments, and there were corresponding emotional experiences. I spoke not a word and stood up. He asked me if I had taken food. Yes, I replied. I will take a little rice with buttermilk. The train came just now, he asked. Yes. Come so soon. I got the just immediately. You were expected, then just take food. You can have whatever you like. There was a feeling of satisfaction and peace. I came out to Akamma who was waiting there. I was not in a condition to speak. It was now 3:05 when I went to before Sri Maharshi. I handed the manuscript and prostrated myself before him, then approached him close, explaining to him how, unlike in Satdarshanam Bhase 3, I had closed the concluding portions with a conspectus of the work and an epilogue in all 20 couplets. I further stated that in one of the couplets I had stated that my commentary is the luster of the pearls which are the composition of Ganapati strung together on a thread, which is the import of Sri Maharshi's teachings. He graciously smiled, looking into that particular verse. He read it aloud appreciatively when I remained quiet, standing quite close by, as I had something else to tell him. I told him that I had written in the next verse that the work was offered on 10 October 1941, and as such it had to be offered then, but I had still to go through the book to find out if there were slips, as I had no time to look back as I went on writing the 243 pages continuously for 20 days and more, in addition to my routine work. That can be done. Would you like to take it now? He asked. No, not now. When it is not being read, it can remain with me. Then he asked me about the colophon. I told him I had left space to write a few words here. Yes, I shall write, he said. You can call it Bhasha. Anyway, as the Maharshi pleases, I replied, but in the introduction I had written the title as Ramana Gita Prakasha Pithika. He immediately saw that and said, then as you have already named it, you can call it so. Then he turned to the end of the book and wrote after Kapali Kirtihi, Prakashya Vakya, and filled up the word Sampata. Then the Samapta. Then the Maharshi audibly read out the 20 couplets and significantly accented the last line Matribhut me Matribhut Mahasya Ramana Namo Namaha. It looked from the manner of his reading as if he had read it before. Just at the time when we were talking about the closing verses, a gentleman was standing outside whom the Maharshi could see through the side window. Addressing him, he said, come in, here is come, showing the book in his hand. In a minute, I saw him entering the hall, coming closer to me. Pointing to him, the Maharshi asked me, do you recognize who it is? I looked at him scrutinizingly. Oh, is it J? I exclaimed, for with difficulty I recognized him to be the same boy who used to come 28 years ago to the Virupaksha cave when we were meeting at the feet of Sri Maharshi. Afterwards, he went out, studied Vyakarna, and specialized in Vedanta. Later, he became Pandit in the Sankara Mutt in Kumbakonam. Later, once I saw him sitting mute in a corner of the hall at the Maharshi's, but that was only for a few minutes in a crowded gathering 10 years ago. We had no opportunity even then to converse. It seems it had to leave the mutt due to some misunderstanding, and a few months back he came to Tiruvannamalai and is making a temporary stay. Sri Maharshi's question to me was significant. The significance was lost upon me at the time. Later I came to know it when people told me about the extraordinary crisis which would have easily led to a fatal end. How is it he looks so weak? I asked. He is very healthy and strong now, Maharshi replied. If you had seen him a fortnight ago, oh, everyone thought he would not live. There was only bone and skin. Now somehow he is there. One word about this Sri T.K. Sundarasa Iyer and Sri A.R. Swami gave me some details about the crisis. There was a general talk and everyone was saying that it was an extraordinary thing that Jay was alive today. A few months back he was seriously laid up in bed with complicated illness including temperature. Later it was found to be cancer in the abdomen, and as is well known, medical science has not definitely succeeded in finding a cure for cancer, and he was given up for lost. He was taken to the hospital from his lodgings. Doctors were changed, and one of the doctors, a local man who seems to be a devotee of the Maharshi, is reported to have said that it is not a question of days but of hours being counted, and humanly speaking there was no hope. But of course, if he was to come back to life at all, his deathbed, then it could be only by the Maharshi's help. Sri Maharshi kept quiet but asked them significantly to do something. Immediately the doctor got unusual craze, did something which might mean anything, and which proved that the advice of the Maharshi was not in vain and meant much more than what was said. Naturally, the boldest among the unbelievers pauses bewildered. My look was still in Sri Maharshi's hand. She was glancing through the pages and, as already said, read aloud the 20 verses concluding the book. Then he kept it on the shelf. Jay, who was sitting there, wanted to see it. The Maharshi hinted that it was not ready to be seen. In fact, he said to Jay, he has yet to go through them once. Jay kept quiet for a minute. Again he asked, I shall just see only the Pithika. Introduction. Sri Maharshi found him obviously to be a little insensible. He looked at me. I was waiting to hear what he, Maharshi, would say, for that was an interesting situation. But Jay came to the rescue of the Maharshi by almost removing the manuscript from the shelf, repeating what he said a minute earlier. Sri Maharshi had to gracefully say yes. Then Jay took it and began to read. Jay went on reading then and there, expressing his opinion or raising some objections, pausing and looking at my questioningly. On one or two occasions I met the objections as they apparently merited as answer. Later I directed him to go on whenever he stopped, and I found his questions meaningless. While starting, I had a presentiment that some obstruction might present itself, and I was determined not to give way to impatience. And it is the attitude that helped and reminded me also of significance of the flower divine solicitude which the mother Arvindo Ashram Pondicherry blessed me with when I took leave of her. It was not Jay's fault if he could not follow the sense of certain passages. It is due to the unthinking habit of many of these people in cramming the standard works of Shastras. I had stated that the sciences in the world were imperfect, continuously changing, developing, while the science of the Atma is asserted by its sponsors to be not so. This idea was quite foreign to his culture. I would not say all pundits are like that, My own Guru Vasishta Ganapati Muni may be considered an honorable exception, but Sri Maharshi appreciatively nodded when the passage was read by J himself, and the great Tamil scholar and poet Muruganar sitting by me, who by the way is not a Sanskrit Pandit, could not only follow but explain to J what was meant. This was because the esteemed friend had a cultured mind. After the Veda Prayana conducted by Sri Raju Sastri in the evening was over, Sri Raju Sastri came to me. Both of us were taken by the Sarvadhikari to his office, ordering the door to be bolted. He looked around cautiously to see if there was anyone who was not in his confidence. I believe there was none else excepting one or two other than we four, including TKS. Having assured himself that we were safe, he requested Raju Sastri to take out the thing. I was wondering what he was going to do. From the Mandahasa, medium-sized cupboard in which household idols are kept for worship, Raju Sastri took out a plate and handed it to him, and he in turn placed it in my hand. It was a few inches square, but its weight betrayed to me the metal even before I saw it. Scrutinizing, indeed, it was solid gold. The diagram was Sri Chakram. I saw the whole thing. It was neatly done. It cost 1,000 rupees. Then there was another, a smaller plate that too was taken out. The third one contained letters inscribed in the diagram. It was Subramanya Yantra. So I conclude this video at this stage. Thank you for watching this video. Namaskar, my dear friend. Thank you.